They found the calf at dawn, standing over her mother's lifeless body. So still she almost looked carved from stone. Her tiny trunk draped across the elephant's face, she refused to move, refused to eat, refused to live. Rangers tried to approach, but the calf let out a sound so raw, so full of heartbreak, it stopped grown men in their tracks. And then she did something no one expected. She stepped between the rescuers and her mother's body, as if daring the world to take her too. What happened next would force a wildlife team into an impossible decision, one that would determine whether this calf lived another day or joined her mother in death. Because before the sun set on the savannah, the calf would make a choice that none of them were prepared to face. The first rays of morning hadn't yet broken across the Macari Flats when the radio cracked to life inside the field station. Dr. Hannah Cole sat alone at her desk, the dim glow of her laptop illuminating the dark circles under her eyes. She had been awake since before dawn, again, unable to sleep as memories of her mother's last days drifted in and out of her mind like ghosts refusing to settle. She reached for her mug of coffee just as the radio burst through the quiet. With a static-laced urgency she felt deep in her chest. Unit 3 to base. We've found a downed adult female elephant. Cause appears to be poaching. The calf. She won't leave the body. Hannah froze, her hand hovering mid-air. Even before the ranger repeated the message, she felt something inside her tighten, as if the words were pulling a string wound too tightly around her heart. She stood, gripping the edge of the desk, waiting for the rest. She keeps trying to lift her mother's head. Won't eat. Won't move. We need immediate support. Hannah didn't answer right away. She closed her eyes, and for a moment she wasn't in Namibia. She was standing in a hospital hallway in Denver, staring at a white sheet pulled over her mother's face, unable to understand how a heartbeat could stop so quickly. The same helplessness washed over her now, uninvited and sharp. She grabbed the radio. I'm on my way. 10 minutes out. Dr. Malik Johnson, the reserve's head veterinarian, stepped into the doorway as she swung her pack over her shoulder. You heard it too? He asked quietly. His expression was grim but steady. He'd been in the field long enough to know what scenes like this looked like. Hannah nodded. How far? About 4 miles from the South Ridge. And Hannah? He waited until she looked at him. It sounds bad. Outside, the air was still cool, the wind carrying grains of red sand across the cracked earth. Hannah climbed into the Land Cruiser, and Ranger, the Australian shepherd mix who served as both scout and emotional barometer for the team, leapt in beside her. He nudged her arm, sensing the heaviness in her breathing. She scratched behind his ear, grateful for the small moment of grounding. The drive felt longer than it was. As the sun rose, the landscape came alive with distorted shadows stretching across wide, unforgiving plains. Hannah kept her eyes forward, but her mind replayed the phrase she couldn't shake. The calf won't leave the body. She whispered it aloud as if testing its weight. She doesn't want to leave her mother. Malik, riding beside her, exhaled slowly. It's instinct. Bonded calves don't understand death. They only understand losing the one creature they rely on for everything. He paused. And they'll die trying to stay close. Hannah gripped the steering wheel tighter. Not today. When they crested the final rise, the scene unfolded below them with crushing clarity. The elephant mother lay collapsed near a dried-up watering hollow, her massive frame unnaturally still. A dark wound marred the side of her head. A poacher's bullet, precise and merciless. Her tusks were gone, crudely hacked away. Around her, the soil was disturbed with tracks that told the story even if no one spoke it. But it was the calf that stole the breath from Hannah's lungs. The small elephant, barely a year old, her skin still soft in places where wrinkles had not fully formed, pressed her tiny forehead against her mother's cheek, pushing, nudging, willing her to move. Every few seconds, she circled the body, trunk sweeping across the still skin, making soft, trembling rumbles that sounded heartbreakingly close to human crying. Hannah stepped out of the vehicle, and for a moment she couldn't move. There was something ancient in the calf's grief, something that cut straight through the layers she'd tried so hard to rebuild since her mother's passing. Ranger stood beside her, tail lowered, ears angled forward with that uncanny sensitivity he possessed, as though he too understood the enormity of what lay before them. A shadow approached. Ethan Ward, the reserve director, strode toward them with a tight jaw and tired eyes. "We have a serious problem," he said without preamble. "Poachers hit a cluster of elephants last night. We think they were scared off before they could take anything but the tusks, but," he nodded toward the carcass, "they'll likely return, and predators will smell the body by dusk." Malik joined Hannah at her side. "If the calf stays here, she's done. We need to tranquilize her and get her to the temporary holding enclosure." Hannah's breath caught. "No, absolutely not. Hannah, she just watched her mother die from a gunshot, Malik. You really want the next human act she experiences to be another shot? Another collapse?" Her voice cracked slightly. "She'll wake up thinking she was attacked too." Ethan crossed his arms. "We don't have the luxury of time. This isn't about her feelings. It's about her survival. If she stays through the night, scavengers will tear her apart while she tries to defend the body." Hannah turned her eyes to the calf. The young elephant looked up then, directly at her. There was nothing animalistic about that gaze. It was raw, bewildered sorrow, mirrored so perfectly that Hannah felt her breath falter. "She's grieving," Hannah whispered. "I know what that looks like." Ethan checked his watch. 6 hours. That's what you get. If that calf isn't away from the body by dusk, we sedate her. He hesitated. "I won't risk losing another animal tonight." Hannah nodded stiffly, though her heartbeat thudded like thunder in her ears. Ranger took a slow step forward, as if reading her resolve. Malik placed a hand on her shoulder before returning to the equipment truck. Hannah knelt in the dust, speaking softly, though she knew the calf couldn't understand the words. "We're going to help you, sweetheart. One way or another." The calf blinked, her small frame trembling as she pressed herself once more against the silent body of her mother. And somewhere in that fragile moment, Hannah sensed something shift, something that would bind their fates far beyond this stretch of desert. Before the story moved forward into decisions with irreversible consequences, Hannah spoke quietly to the camera operator who had been documenting the rescue effort. "If you're still with us, you're part of a remarkable community here at Whispering Hearts, where real stories of extraordinary animal connections come to life. Every subscriber helps us share more heart-touching moments that reveal the power of compassion across species. Don't forget to hit subscribe, because the journey ahead is one you'll feel long after the story ends." The wind swept across the sand. The calf nudged her mother again, and the countdown began. The sun climbed higher over the Macari Flats, washing the earth in a harsh, unforgiving light. Heat shimmered across the cracked soil as Hannah stood beside the fallen elephant, her heart still thrumming with the weight of Ethan's ultimatum. 6 hours. 6 hours to convince a grieving calf to leave her mother's side or watch her be forced into sedation. Another violent moment layered over an already unbearable memory. Malik crouched near the elephant's body, examining the entry wound. "Single round," he murmured. "High caliber. Clean shot." His voice mixed clinical focus with a weariness that suggested he had spoken these words too many times. He wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. "Hannah, this wasn't amateurs. They knew exactly what they were doing." "And they'll be back," Ethan added, scanning the horizon. "Poachers don't leave a scene unfinished. If we stay here too long, we risk getting caught in the crossfire." Hannah didn't look at either of them. Her eyes were on the calf, watching how she pressed her small body against her mother's, as if trying to become part of her, or disappear with her. The little elephant's breaths came shallow and uneven, each movement threaded with confusion and pain. "It isn't just her safety," Hannah said quietly. "It's her heart. Her entire world just ended." Ethan exhaled sharply. "Heart or no heart, if she stays here tonight, she dies. I won't allow that." He gestured toward the trees in the distance, where vultures circled lazily. "This place will be crawling with predators by sundown." Ranger, sitting close to Hannah's side, let out a soft whine. He could feel her distress as tangibly as he could smell the blood drying in the sand. Hannah rested a gentle hand on his head, grounding herself. "We need another approach," she murmured, more to herself than to the men beside her. Malik rose to stand next to her. "Hannah, I know this is hitting you hard, but sedation is the fastest, safest option. She'll be asleep in seconds. We'll transport her without trauma." Hannah's jaw tightened. Without trauma? She watched her mother collapse after a gun went off. She doesn't understand cause and effect. All she knows is gunshot equals death. And now you want her to feel a sting, fall unconscious, and wake up somewhere strange, alone. Malik sighed. "You're assuming she'll connect the two." "She will. Elephants don't forget." Ethan stepped between them, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "I understand your point, Hannah." "I do. But emotions don't change reality. Nightfall does not negotiate." As if sensing the rise in tension, the calf gave a low, trembling rumble, a sound so soft and wounded it cut straight through the argument. She circled her mother's body again, touching the limp trunk with her own, then pressing her forehead against her mother's cheek. Hannah felt her throat tighten. "She's trying to wake her." Malik's voice gentled. "Yes, and she can't." The truth settled over them like a heavy cloth. Ethan checked his watch again. 5 hours and 30 minutes. If she isn't moving by then, we dart her. That's final. He walked off toward one of the patrol trucks, barking orders to the rangers to set up perimeter scans. Malik followed, leaving Hannah standing alone with Ranger beside the grieving calf. The little elephant lifted her head just enough to look at Hannah, her eyes glossy with a sorrow that transcended species. A single tear cut down the calf's dusty cheek, a detail Hannah wished she could unsee. "Hey, sweetheart," Hannah whispered as she stepped closer. "I know you're scared. I know you don't understand why she won't get up." Ranger trotted forward a few paces, his posture relaxed but attentive. The calf watched him carefully, torn between fear and curiosity. Hannah knelt slowly, keeping her movements soft and deliberate. The air smelled of dust, heat, and the fading scent of the calf's mother. "You're not alone," she said softly. "Not anymore." The calf turned, back toward her mother, and nudged the still body once more. The motion was weaker this time, more desperate. Her small frame trembled as though grief itself were too heavy to carry. Hannah closed her eyes briefly. She remembered standing beside her mother's hospice bed, touching a hand that had gone cold too quickly. Remembered whispering, "Wake up," even when her rational mind knew that wasn't possible. The ache that lived inside her since that day pulsed deep in her chest now. When she stood, resolve steadied her. "Malik," she called out, forcing her voice to remain calm. "There has to be a way to guide her voluntarily." He turned, concern etched across his features. "What exactly are you proposing?" Hannah looked down at Ranger, who gazed up at her with a quiet awareness. "We let Ranger try." Ethan scoffed from across the clearing. "He's a dog, Hannah, not a miracle worker." "He's more intuitive than most people," Hannah countered. "And the calf doesn't see him as a threat. She needs a presence that won't push or chase or force." Malik hesitated. Ethan visibly bristled. "Hannah," Malik said softly, "you're asking us to give up precious hours on a gamble." "No," she replied, her tone firming. "I'm asking you to give her a chance to choose life." Ethan's voice rose. "And what if your chance gets her killed?" "Then I'll carry that," she said quietly. "But sedation will traumatize her, and if we break her trust now, it may never recover." Ethan stared at her for a long moment, then at Ranger, who sat watching him with unblinking eyes. Finally, he exhaled heavily. "Fine, 1 hour, not 6. 1. If she hasn't moved by then, we sedate." Hannah opened her mouth to protest, but Malik shook his head gently. "Take the hour." She nodded. "Ranger," she whispered, patting her thigh. The dog trotted forward, stopping at a respectful distance from the calf. He lay down in the dirt, rolling slightly to show his belly, a display of vulnerability almost never seen in working dogs. The calf blinked, confused by this strange softness in front of her. Ranger didn't move toward her. He didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply existed in the same space with a calm so complete it felt like an offering. Minutes passed. The calf lowered her head toward him. Hannah held her breath. The wind stilled. Even the vultures circling overhead seemed to pause, as though waiting for something to shift. "Come on, little one," Hannah whispered. "See him. See the safety." Ranger lifted his head just enough to make eye contact with the calf. Then he stood slowly, took 3 small steps away from the body, and sat down once more. The calf hesitated, trembling, torn. Then she took a step. Just one. But it was enough to make Malik whisper, "I'll be damned." Ethan watched from afar, frozen mid-stride. Hannah felt tears sting her eyes. Ranger wagged his tail once, subtle and inviting. The calf took another step. For the first time since her mother fell, she wasn't touching the body, and the hour had only just begun. For a long moment, the Macari Flats held its breath. The calf's tiny foot pressed into the sand, her weight shifting forward as if the world itself were nudging her along. Ranger remained perfectly still, his tail resting in a soft curve behind him, offering quiet reassurance. Hannah didn't dare move. She sensed that even the slightest misstep could shatter the fragile thread pulling the calf away from her mother's body. "She took a step," Malik murmured, as though afraid to disturb the air. "Hannah!" She actually took a step. But the calf wasn't steady. Her trunk reached backward, sweeping across her mother's cooling skin, and a small whimper-like rumble escaped her. She was torn, caught between instinct and a strange, gentle pull coming from the dog sitting patiently ahead. Ranger rose again, slow as drifting sand, and trotted a few feet farther. He didn't look directly at the calf. Instead, he turned his head sideways in that soft, deferential way animals used to say, "I mean no harm." Then he sat once more and waited. The calf watched him with wide, wet eyes. "Come on, sweetheart," Hannah whispered. "He's safe. He's here for you." Malik stepped beside her. "If she follows the dog again, she might fully detach from the body," he said quietly. "That could be the opening we need." Before Hannah could respond, a piercing cry echoed across the flats. 3 vultures swooped lower, their wings cutting through the hot air with restless anticipation. The calf shuddered, pressing closer to her mother's body again. Hannah cursed under her breath. The presence of scavengers could push her back into panic. Ethan jogged toward them from the ridge. "We have a problem," he called out. "Poacher tracks on the east side." "Fresh." His voice dropped. "They were here less than an hour ago." Hannah stiffened. That meant they might return to retrieve whatever they hadn't finished taking. Malik's expression hardened. "If they come back during this, we're sitting ducks." Ethan nodded. "The Rangers are sweeping the area, but we need to keep this moving. I'm not extending the deadline again." But once again, Ranger acted before anyone else could. He let out a single soft bark. Not loud, not alarming, just enough to draw the calf's attention. Then he lowered himself so his belly brushed the ground, inching forward in a playful crouch. It was the kind of gesture he used with injured antelopes and frightened livestock, a universal invitation that seemed to say, "Follow me, you're safe." The calf blinked, her breathing hitched. Then she took another trembling step toward him. "Good girl," Hannah breathed, her chest swelling with cautious hope. Ranger rose and padded a little farther from the mother's side. Again, the calf followed, 2 steps this time, her trunk curling anxiously toward herself. When she stopped, she turned her head back toward her mother's still form and gave a low, trembling moan. It vibrated through the earth, a sound so ancient and full of grief that even Malik looked away. Hannah felt the sound in her bones. "She's saying goodbye," she whispered. "No," Malik replied gently. "She's fighting the goodbye." Ranger circled back toward her, walking past her shoulder and looping around as if drawing a path. The calf followed the arc of his movement with her eyes, and slowly, painfully slowly, she stepped after him. 1 foot, then the other. Each step was a negotiation with her own breaking heart. "Keep going, girl," Ethan urged under his breath, though he pretended he wasn't rooting for the effort. But the heat was rising fast now, shimmering waves distorting the horizon. The calf, already weakened from shock and dehydration, staggered slightly. She let out a faint squeak of distress. Hannah's pulse quickened. "She's exhausted," she said. "We need to get her water." "I'll grab a container," Malik said, heading for the truck. Ranger seemed to sense the calf's weakening state. He sat near her, letting her steady herself on the idea of his presence. Hannah knelt a few feet away, keeping her movements slow. When Malik returned with a water bucket, Hannah placed it on the ground about 30 feet from the elephant mother's body. Far enough to encourage distance, close enough not to overwhelm the calf. Ranger walked to the bucket and began drinking noisily, splashing water with his tongue like a pup at a summer pond. Hannah couldn't help but smile at the deliberate exaggeration. "Show off," she whispered. But his performance worked. The calf's trunk lifted, sniffing. She took 1 step, then halted, glancing back toward her mother with a sorrow so visible it made Hannah's chest ache. "Go on," Hannah whispered. "It's all right." Ranger lifted his head from the bucket and looked at the calf with soft, steady eyes. Then he tapped the bucket gently with his paw. A coaxing gesture he had never been trained for. The calf swayed, legs trembling. Then, as though surrendering to a need greater than grief, she crossed the distance toward Ranger and lowered her trunk into the water. When the first cool splash hit her tongue, her entire body shivered. She drank deeply, messy and frantic at first, then slower, more rhythmic. Hannah covered her mouth with her hand. Tears slipped past her fingers. Malik whispered, "That's it. That's life choosing itself." The calf drank for nearly a full minute before lifting her head. She stood close to Ranger, her trunk brushing his back lightly. A gesture of curiosity, maybe even trust. But the victory was fragile. A low growl echoed from the ridge. In the distance, shapes emerged, 3 hyenas trotting with predatory purpose. They sniffed the air, turning toward the scent of the fallen elephant. Ethan swore loudly. "They're early. I thought we had more time." Ranger jumped to his feet, barking sharply. The calf startled, stepping closer to Hannah, confusion clouding her eyes again. "Keep her calm," Malik urged. "We'll handle this." 2 rangers fired warning shots into the air. The hyenas scattered but lingered at the edges, pacing restlessly. The spell had been broken. The calf backed away, panic rising. Her gaze darted wildly. First at her mother, then at the predators, then at the strange humans surrounding her. She let out a loud, frightened bellow, and her knees buckled. "Easy," Hannah soothed, moving closer. "Stay with us. Stay with him." She gestured toward Ranger. The dog barked again. Not in alarm this time, but in command, as if insisting the calf focus on him. He circled her once, gently, herding without touching her. Slowly, the calf steadied. "She's still with us," Malik said, "but barely." Ethan checked the sky, the vultures, the ridges. "We can't stay here. Poachers, hyenas, this isn't sustainable. Hannah, you've bought her time. But she needs to move farther now." Hannah knelt beside the calf, placing a careful hand near her small, trembling leg. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I know you don't understand any of this, but we have to go, and Ranger won't leave you." Ranger nudged the calf's trunk gently. The calf exhaled, a soft, grief-stricken sound. But she took another step toward him, a small one, a brave one. And with that, the dog began to lead her again, away from death and toward something fragile but possible. Hope. By late afternoon, the sky over the Macari Flats had shifted from its usual dry brightness to a muted, coppery haze. A wall of dust loomed far on the horizon, a warning sign every ranger recognized instantly. Ethan was the first to say what they were all thinking. "Sandstorm, and it's coming in fast." Hannah felt a chill despite the heat pressing down around them. The calf, still following Ranger in small, unsteady steps, was already worn thin from grief and dehydration. A storm would terrify any adult elephant, let alone a fragile, newly orphaned calf. They needed shelter before the winds reached them. "Malik, we need the temporary shelter up," she said. "Now." Ranger barked once, as though echoing her urgency. Malik jogged toward the supply truck while two rangers began assembling a portable canopy and windbreak. Ethan scanned the ridge with binoculars, though visibility was already shifting, the air thickening with suspended dust. "Storm's speeding up," he muttered. "We have maybe 30 minutes." Hannah turned back to the calf. The little elephant pressed close to Ranger again, trembling in a way that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. Her eyes flicked toward the direction where her mother's body lay, now barely visible beyond a veil of swirling grit. "She wants to go back," Hannah murmured. Ranger let out a gentle whine, positioning himself between the calf and the direction she kept looking. His tail lowered, ears angled forward, a quiet message of reassurance. But then the wind hit. It started as a low, throaty moan rolling across the plains. Then the first gust slammed through camp, lifting sheets of sand that scraped across skin and stung like tiny needles. The calf bellowed in fear, stumbling backward. The sound was raw, panicked, a cry that pierced the growing roar of the storm. Hannah rushed to her. "Easy, sweetheart, easy." But the calf bolted. Not far. Her tiny legs were too tired for distance, but far enough to break Ranger's careful guidance. She turned sharply toward the storm-blurred outline of her mother, letting out a haunting, trumpeted cry. "No," Hannah whispered, her heart twisting. "She'll run straight into the storm." Without hesitation, Ranger sprinted after her. Even through the rising wind, he kept his movement controlled, circling her and cutting her path off with the practiced instinct of a herding dog. The calf reared her head, confused and terrified, her trunk sweeping frantically through the dust. "Hannah!" Ethan shouted. "We need to get under cover, now!" But Hannah didn't move toward the shelter. She moved toward the calf. Her boots sank into softening sand as she fought the wind, each step a battle against the storm, gathering strength. Grit filled her eyes, coated her teeth. She pulled her scarf up to cover her mouth, blinking through the blur. Ranger reached the calf first. He didn't bark. Barking would startle her. Instead, he leaned his body against her small front leg, grounding her with touch alone. It halted the calf just enough for Hannah to reach her side. The calf's tiny body shook violently. The storm surged again, swirling around them like a living force. Thunder rolled in the distance, not from rain, but from the shifting air masses colliding over the desert. Hannah knew what she had to do. Slowly, so slowly, she approached the calf's shoulder. "It's okay," she murmured. though her voice was nearly swallowed by the wind. "I'm right here," the calf squealed again, a sound of pure fear, but she didn't run. Not this time. Hannah slipped the heavy canvas blanket from her shoulders and carefully draped it over the calf's head and back, forming a cocoon against the storm. The calf froze, confused by the sudden darkness, but the fabric softened the bite of the sand. Ranger pressed against the calf's other side, forming a living barrier. And then, instinctively, Hannah leaned her forehead against the calf's shoulder. She held on, not tightly, not forcefully, just with enough weight to say, "You're not alone. Not tonight." The calf let out a trembling rumble. Thin, broken, but quieter now. More wind slashed across them, bending the sparse trees and shaking the temporary shelters. Malik shouted something from the canopy, but his voice was lost. Ethan motioned desperately for Hannah to come in, but she shook her head. "She can't move," Malik yelled into the wind, cupping his hands to amplify his voice. "She's too scared." Hannah didn't answer. Her entire focus was on the calf. "You're safe," she breathed. "Ranger's here. I'm here. We're going to get through this." The calf's tiny trunk reached out blindly from beneath the blanket, brushing against Hannah's arm. The gesture nearly undid her. It was the same searching motion she had made years ago when she reached across her mother's hospital bed in the dark, hoping for a warmth that wasn't there. "I know," Hannah whispered. "I remember that feeling too." The storm raged for another 20 minutes, though it felt like hours before the winds finally began to ease. The swirling clouds of dust thinned as shapes slowly re-emerged. The canopy Ethan and Malik secured stood firm, though the edges flapped wildly. Ethan waved again, voice hoarse from shouting, "Bring her in while it's calm." Hannah nodded. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly, lifting the blanket enough for the calf to see her. "Let's get out of this." Ranger trotted ahead, turning back to make sure the calf followed. And she did, haltingly, exhausted, but trusting. Each step she took toward the shelter felt like a victory carved from the rawness of the day. Inside the windbreak, the world felt muted compared to the chaos outside. Malik guided them to the calmest corner, spreading extra blankets on the sand. The calf collapsed onto her knees, her sides rising and falling with deep, shaky breaths. Hannah sat beside her, letting her hand rest gently against the calf's flank. Ranger curled up against the calf's front legs, head resting on her knee. Gradually, her breathing steadied. "She would have died out there," Malik said quietly. "If you hadn't gone after her." Hannah brushed sand from her face. "She wasn't running from us. She was running back to the only safety she's ever known." Malik nodded solemnly. "Grief can make even the desert feel like home." Ethan knelt beside them, his voice softer than it had been all day. "We'll stay here tonight. She's too fragile to move anywhere else until morning." Hannah didn't argue. Her hand remained on the calf's warm skin. The little elephant blinked slowly, then rested her head, not on Ranger, but on Hannah's leg. It was the first time she had sought comfort from a human. Outside, the storm finally broke apart, leaving the desert eerily quiet. Inside the shelter, 3 exhausted souls, one human, one dog, one orphaned elephant, leaned into each other and breathed in the same fragile rhythm. For the first time since her mother died, the calf slept. Morning crept slowly across the Makari flats, painting the sand in pale gold as the remnants of the storm settled like dust on an old memory. Hannah had barely slept. She remained beside the calf through most of the night, listening to the soft, steady breathing that had finally replaced the frightened tremors. Ranger, curled against the little elephant's legs, didn't stir until the sunlight stretched across his fur. When the calf, whom Hannah had begun calling Luna in her mind, though she hadn't said the name aloud yet, finally lifted her head, her eyes carried a distant emptiness. Her grief had not softened. It had simply grown quieter, turning inward like a closing flower. Malik stepped into the shelter, carrying a bundle of fresh acacia branches, their leaves still damp with morning dew. "Breakfast time," he said gently, placing them near Luna. But Luna didn't move. She watched the leaves without interest. Her trunk hung loosely, barely swaying. It was as if all her instincts, the ones that made an elephant calf explore, eat, reach, had been switched off. Hannah frowned. "She needs to eat something, Malik." He nodded. "I know, but she won't." "Not yet." Ranger stood, stretched, and nudged Luna's leg with his nose. Luna blinked but didn't respond. The dog looked up at Hannah, tail low, as if asking for direction. "She's retreating," Hannah murmured. "Yesterday she fought. Today she's fading." Malik sighed, rubbing his eyes. "This part is harder than most people realize. The physical trauma is easier to treat. Emotional trauma, that's a different battlefield." A soft sound came from the entrance. Martha Lee, one of the reserve's oldest rangers, a woman who had survived more storms than any of them, walked in carrying a metal kettle and 3 tin cups. "I figured you all could use something warm," she said. Hannah accepted a cup gratefully. The steam fogged her glasses, but the smell of strong black tea seeped through her tired bones. Martha settled onto a folded blanket, her eyes drifting toward Luna with a knowing heaviness. "She hasn't touched anything, has she?" "No," Hannah replied softly. "Water, yes. Food, no." Martha nodded, almost as if she had expected this. "My grandmother used to say something about grief," she began, wrapping her hands around her cup. "She'd say, grief must be fed before hunger can return. A heart has to empty itself before a body remembers it needs living." The words settled over the small shelter like falling ash. Hannah looked at Luna again. The calf hadn't moved from her curled position. Her eyes followed Ranger occasionally, but there was no curiosity left. Only exhaustion threaded through each blink. "She's still feeding her grief," Martha said quietly. The sentence struck something deep inside Hannah. She felt her throat tighten. "I understand that more than I wish I did," she whispered. Martha didn't pry. She simply rested a hand gently on Hannah's shoulder. Then talked to her, not like a scientist, like someone who knows the shape of loss. Hannah hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she scooted closer to Luna, sitting cross-legged in the sand where the calf could see her clearly. Ranger settled between them, forming a bridge of familiar warmth. Hannah took a slow breath. "You know, there was a night not too long ago when I felt a lot like you do right now," she began. Her voice trembled, but she didn't shy away from it. "I was in a hospital. Everything smelled like disinfectant and buzzing lights. And I kept thinking that if I just said the right words or held her hand tight enough, maybe my mom would wake up." Luna shifted slightly, her trunk brushing the sand. "I remember standing there," Hannah continued, "trying to breathe in a world that suddenly felt too big and too empty at the same time. And every morning after she died, I would wake up for just a second, believing she was still alive. Just 1 second." She swallowed. Then reality would come crashing in again, every day, over and over. Luna's eyes, deep, dark, and impossibly wise, met hers. It felt like a conversation without language. Ranger pressed against Luna's front leg, leaning into her with gentle insistence. The calf's trunk twitched. It was the first intentional movement she'd made all morning. Malik whispered to Martha, "She's listening." Hannah wiped her cheek with the back of her hand. "I don't know how long your heart will hurt like this, little one. But I promise you, living doesn't mean leaving her behind. It just means taking her love with you into whatever comes next." A single tear slid down Luna's cheek. Not dramatic, just quiet, steady grief. And then something shifted. The calf's trunk rose an inch, then another. Slowly, she reached toward the acacia leaves. She didn't pick one up yet. She only touched them. Barely. Like testing the idea of life again. Ranger wagged his tail just once. "That's it," Hannah whispered, smiling through tears she no longer tried to hide. "Take your time." But Luna wasn't ready to eat. Not yet. She merely touched the leaves, learning their edges, reminding herself of what food was. It was enough. The day unfolded gently, a slow rhythm between sorrow and healing. Luna drank water when she needed to, but refused every branch Malik brought. Hannah didn't push. She sat with her, told her stories, let silence do its work. By afternoon, Luna stood on shaky legs and wandered a few feet from the shelter, her trunk exploring the air as though reacquainting herself with the world. Ranger trotted alongside her, matching her uncertain pace. "She's moving," Malik said, relief warming his tone. Martha nodded. "The heart is heavy, but it's still beating." As evening approached, Hannah returned with another bundle of fresh acacia. She placed it a short distance away and stepped back. Luna hesitated, her ears flicking. Then, slowly, she reached out, plucked a single leaf, and placed it in her mouth. Hannah felt her breath catch in her throat. Malik exhaled a long, trembling sigh. There it is. The turn. Luna chewed mechanically at first, without enthusiasm. But she chewed. She swallowed. Then she reached for another. Ranger barked softly. Encouragement, celebration, relief. Luna nudged him gently with her trunk, and for the first time since her world had shattered, she did something unexpected. She made a small sound, half rumble, half sigh. A sound that wasn't grief, a sound that was almost living. Hannah leaned back, letting the moment fill her like sunlight after a long winter. Martha smiled. "She's not healed," she murmured, "but she's decided to stay." "Yeah," Hannah whispered, "she's choosing life." Outside, the desert sky shifted from gold to deep blue. Inside the shelter, a fragile beginning unfolded quietly. Just a few leaves, a few breaths, and the smallest step toward a future neither of them could yet imagine. But it was enough. It was everything. Over the following days, the rhythm around camp changed in ways so subtle that only those who had kept vigil with the calf could appreciate them. Luna, still thin, still grieving, still unsure of her place in this world without her mother, began to move more often, her steps no longer dragged solely by sorrow. Ranger stayed near her throughout, shadowing her like a steadfast guardian. When she paused, he paused. When she hesitated, he waited. It was on the morning of the 5th day that Hannah noticed the first spark of something unexpected, something that looked like curiosity. Luna had wandered a few yards from the shelter, sniffing at the edge of a dried-out shrub. Ranger trotted ahead and discovered one of the worn rubber training balls the rangers used for canine drills. He nudged it toward Luna with his nose. The ball bounced once, rolled, and tapped against Luna's foot. The calf recoiled at first, trunk shooting upward in alarm. Hannah stepped forward instinctively, but before she could intervene, Ranger nudged the ball again, gentle this time, letting it roll slowly until it touched Luna's front toe. Luna stared at the strange object, her trunk curled toward it, cautiously investigating. After a long moment, she gave the smallest, shyest tap. The ball wobbled and tipped over. Ranger barked once, quick and bright. It was the first cheerful sound Hannah had heard in days. Luna's ears lifted, ever so slightly, in what could almost be interpreted as interest. She nudged the ball again. Ranger responded by batting it back with his paw. "Look at her," Malik murmured behind Hannah. "She's testing the world again." Hannah's eyes softened. She's remembering she's still a child. But not everything came easily. There were moments, long ones, when Luna froze, staring at nothing, a ripple of grief shaking through her body. times when she let out a low, aching rumble that sent Ranger pacing with concern. Nights when she refused to lie down at all, afraid of closing her eyes. Healing, Hannah knew, was never a straight line. Yet something had shifted. A doorway had opened. Later that afternoon, as the heat settled into a dull blanket across the flats, Luna discovered the shallow water basin Malik had filled near the shelter. Ranger dipped his paws into it with obvious enthusiasm, splashing himself and sending droplets flying. The calf's eyes widened. Water had always been a source of joy for elephants, a place of bonding, cooling, and play. Ranger jumped in again, dunking his face, then shaking vigorously until he looked like a soaked mop. Hannah laughed out loud, an unrestrained sound she hadn't felt in months. Luna watched the commotion with visible fascination. "Come on, sweetheart," Hannah encouraged. "Try it." Ranger gave a final shake and nudged the water with his paw. Luna inched closer. Her trunk dipped toward the surface, tasting the scent of it. Then, in a moment that rippled through everyone watching, she stepped into the basin with one tentative foot. The coolness surprised her. She froze, ears flaring. Ranger bounded around her in a circle, splashing playfully. And Luna, cautious but willing, placed a second foot into the water. "She's doing it," Malik whispered. "She's actually doing it." A third foot, then the fourth. The calf let out a tiny huff of astonishment as the waters swirled around her ankles. Ranger pawed the basin's edge again, splattering Luna's legs, and for the first time, a new sound emerged from the calf. A soft, breathy rumble that wasn't grief, wasn't fear. It was almost delight. The moment was short. A cloud passed overhead, shifting the light. Luna paused, perhaps remembering another watering hole, another sunny day with her mother. She stepped back out as quickly as she had stepped in, but it didn't matter. The world had color again, even if only in fragments. That evening, Hannah wrote in her notebook, something she had stopped doing after her mother died. She wrote about Luna's first playful steps, the feel of laughter catching in her own throat, the strange, sweet ache of watching Ranger coax life back into a heart so recently shattered. Martha joined her near the lantern light, sipping tea. "You know," she said thoughtfully, "grief doesn't leave. It changes shape. Sometimes it becomes a shadow, sometimes a companion, sometimes a teacher." Hannah didn't look up from her writing. "And sometimes," she said softly, "it becomes the thing that binds you to someone else." Martha nodded approvingly. "Exactly." But not everyone saw Luna's progress as hope alone. Later that night, as the desert cooled and the sky turned purple with early stars, Ethan approached Hannah and Malik with a concerned expression. "We need to talk," he said. Hannah straightened. "What's wrong?" Ethan gestured toward Luna, who slept in a small circle with Ranger lying protectively against her side. "She's bonding too much." Hannah frowned. "She needs stability, comfort. After everything she's lost, this bond is saving her." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes, but it could also doom her in the long run." Malik stepped forward. "Explain." "Elephants aren't meant to bond with humans and dogs," Ethan said firmly. "Not as primary attachments. If she stays this attached, integrating her into a herd later will become nearly impossible. She'll rely on you too, and Ranger, instead of her own kind, and she'll never learn the skills she needs to survive." Hannah's stomach sank. She had known, somewhere inside, that this conversation would come. She just wasn't ready for it. "So what are you saying?" she asked, her voice low. "I'm saying we can't keep her here forever," Ethan replied. "There's a sanctuary, Sunrise Elephant Sanctuary, north of here. They have a matriarch named Kaylee. She's taken in orphans before. If any elephant can give Luna a real future, it's her." Hannah swallowed hard, but Luna barely trusts the world. And you want to uproot her again? Malik placed a hand on Hannah's shoulder. He's right. It's too soon now. But eventually, she'll need other elephants. Ethan softened his tone. You've given her the first step back to life, but if we keep her here, we'd be keeping her small. She needs a herd. Hannah looked back at Luna. Sweet, trembling, brave Luna. Her small body curled under the lavender sky. Ranger's steady warmth pressed at her side. A knot formed in Hannah's chest. She just learned to play, she whispered. How can we take her away from the one creature who taught her? Ethan's gaze softened. Because loving her means giving her the life she was meant for, not the one that's easiest for us to bear. Hannah wiped her cheek quietly. It feels like losing her, she murmured. Malik's voice was gentle. No, it's letting her grow. A long silence settled over the camp, and as the stars brightened above them, Hannah realized something painful, but true. Luna's healing had begun, which meant the next chapter of her life, and the hardest chapter for Hannah, was coming sooner than she wished. The drive to Sunrise Elephant Sanctuary was long, winding, and heavier than Hannah had anticipated. Luna stood in the reinforced transport trailer behind them, her soft rumbling calls vibrating through the metal walls. Ranger sat upright in the passenger seat, alert to every sound she made, emitting low whines whenever her voice carried notes of uncertainty. She's scared, Hannah murmured, tightening her grip on the steering wheel. Malik, riding in the back seat, leaned forward. She'll settle once she sees the sanctuary. It's peaceful. Safe. Safe. The word echoed in Hannah's mind. Quiet, but sharp. She knew Malik was right. Sunrise Sanctuary had a long record of integrating orphaned calves. Still, a part of her felt as though she were walking Luna to a place where she herself would no longer be needed. They arrived just past midday. The sanctuary stretched across rolling grasslands bordered by acacia-lined watering holes. Shade structures dotted the habitat, and beyond it all moved the unmistakable silhouettes of elephants, a herd of 12, each one massive, calm and grounded like ancient pillars of the earth. Luna let out a soft, quivering cry when the trailer doors opened. She pressed herself toward the back, eyes wide at the unfamiliar landscape. It's okay, Hannah whispered, climbing inside the trailer. Luna's trunk brushed her hand immediately, desperate for reassurance. Ranger bounded in after her, tail wagging. He pressed against Luna's legs, offering comfort as only he knew how. Gloria Mendez, the sanctuary director, a woman with the calm authority of someone who'd spent her life among giants, approached with gentle steps. Let's give her time, she said quietly. No rushing. Kaylee will come when she's ready. Curly, Malik murmured. The matriarch? Gloria nodded. She lost a calf last year. Her heart is still open to mothering. That's why she might accept Luna. Hannah's stomach twisted. Luna wasn't ready for another mother. Not so soon, but she needed one all the same. The trailer ramp lowered fully, and Ranger trotted down first. He paused halfway, looking back at Luna, tail sweeping gently. The calf shifted, trembling. That's it, Hannah coaxed. You follow him, just like before. Luna hesitated, then stepped onto the ramp. Her legs shook under her weight, but Ranger stayed close, guiding her down to the soft dirt. Hannah stayed beside them, whispering encouragements she hoped Luna felt more than understood. As they approached the open paddock area, Gloria spoke quietly. Kylie will come when she decides the time is right. She always does. The words barely left her lips when the air seemed to shift. Across the field, an enormous elephant stepped forward from the herd. Her tusks were long and curved, her ears ragged with age. Every movement radiated steady authority. Kaylee. She walked with deliberate calm, her trunk swaying in slow arcs as she assessed the newcomers. Luna froze, shrinking behind Ranger, her ears flattened, the posture of a calf bracing for the unknown. "It's okay," Hannah whispered, though her own heart raced. "You're safe." Kaylee stopped about 20 yards away. She lifted her trunk and released a deep, resonant rumble that vibrated through the soil. Luna simpered and pressed herself harder against Ranger. But Ranger, remarkably, did not retreat. Instead, he sat down right there in the dirt, facing Kali, tail resting quietly, posture open and respectful. He did not bark, he did not growl, he simply acknowledged her presence. Kali tilted her head slightly, then stepped closer, 10 yards. 5. Luna trembled so hard her tiny frame shook visibly. Hannah bit her lip, fighting the urge to intervene. "Trust the process," Gloria murmured. Kaylee stopped a few feet away from Luna. Slowly, achingly, slowly, she extended her trunk and touched the calf's cheek, then her ear, then her side. It was gentle, methodical, motherly. "She's examining her," Malik whispered, "just like a mother meeting her own newborn." Luna stood frozen, torn between fear and longing. Her eyes darted toward Hannah, silently pleading for explanation. "It's all right," Hannah whispered through tears. "She won't hurt you." Then something extraordinary happened. Kaylee stepped sideways, exposing her flank, her most vulnerable position, a gesture of trust. And then she wrapped her trunk loosely around Luna's small body. Hannah's vision blurred. Malik wiped his eyes openly. "She accepts her," Gloria whispered. "Kaylee is offering to be her mother." But the moment shattered as quickly as it formed. With a sharp cry, Luna whirled away from Kaylee's embrace and ran straight toward Hannah and Ranger. She pressed her body against them, trembling violently. "She's overwhelmed," Malik said gently. "It's too much for her, too fast." Hannah knelt and placed her forehead against Luna's trunk. "Sweetheart, I know it's scary. You don't have to choose yet." Kaylee didn't pursue. She stepped back with grace, her wise eyes observing without judgment. Over the next several days, the sanctuary established a gentle pattern. Kaylee approached the fence each morning. Luna approached too, but only halfway. They touched trunks through the slats. The connection grew in tiny increments. On the 5th morning, Gloria walked over with a purposeful expression. "I think it's time," she said softly. We opened the gate. Hannah's stomach dropped. "We let Luna decide?" she asked. Gloria nodded. "The herd cannot claim her until she chooses to join them." The gate creaked open. The world seemed to hold its breath. Luna stood at the far end of the paddock, Ranger at her side. She looked at the open gate, then at Hannah, then toward the waiting figure of Kaylee at the edge of the field. Her trunk wavered with indecision. "She's scared," Malik murmured. "She's torn," Hannah whispered. Then Ranger did something none of them expected. He walked, not toward Hannah, not toward Luna, but toward Kaylee. He sat right at Kaylee's feet, glanced back at Luna, and wagged his tail once. The gesture was unmistakable. "It's safe," Hannah translated through a trembling smile. "He's telling her it's safe." Luna's eyes softened the way a child's might when they see a familiar friend already standing inside a darkened room. 1 step. 2. She crossed the threshold of the gate. Her small body trembled, but she kept walking, straight toward Kaylee. The matriarch lowered her trunk and rested it gently on Luna's head. A mother's touch, a daughter's acceptance. The herd approached in a slow, respectful circle, greeting Luna with soft rumbles and gentle trunk brushes. Ranger trotted back to Hannah, tail wagging proudly. "She chose," Malik whispered. Hannah wiped her tears. She did. But the relief was bittersweet. because choosing her herd meant Luna would someday have to let go of the only human who had stood beside her through her darkest hours. For now, though, there was only one truth. Luna was no longer lost. She finally belonged. The years that followed Luna's first step through the sanctuary gate unfolded like chapters in a story written by time itself. Slow, patient, and full of the quiet miracles that only nature can compose. Hannah visited every 2 weeks at first, then once a month as her fieldwork expanded, though she never stayed away long enough for Luna to forget the sound of her vehicle approaching along the gravel road. Each visit was its own reunion. Luna, no longer the trembling orphan who clung to Ranger for courage, would break from the herd's grazing line the moment she heard the truck's engine. She rumbled low and joyfully, trotting to the fence, dust rising behind her like a small celebration. Ranger, gray-muzzled now, would bark with excitement the moment he spotted her. He would press his aging body against the fence, tail thumping fiercely, and Luna would wrap her trunk around his old shoulders as delicately as if holding a fragile branch. But with each visit, Hannah also saw what she had hoped for and feared taking shape. Luna was becoming an elephant, a real one, a confident one who stood tall beside Coley during herd movements, who learned to scoop water with precision, who communicated in deep rumbles Hannah could feel through the soles of her boots. She watched Luna nudge young calves when they wandered too far, watched her linger beside older elephants when they rested. Luna had purpose, responsibility, a life that no longer needed Hannah at its center. It hurt in the quiet way pride often does. Still, Hannah kept coming. She documented Luna's growth, Ranger's aging, and the rhythms of a herd bound together by love and loss and ancient instinct. She brought Luna's old rubber ball once, thinking it might awaken a spark of childhood memory. Luna nudged it politely, then set it aside. Ranger sniffed it, sneezed, and leaned into Hannah as if to say, "We're too old for that now." Time was changing them all. One warm afternoon, 7 years after the day Luna followed Ranger away from death, Hannah steered her vehicle through the sanctuary gate for what she thought would be an ordinary visit. The air shimmered above the grasslands, and birds arced lazy patterns overhead. Ranger, now moving with the stiff gait of age, sat beside her. His breathing was slower, his face softened by years of gray, but his eyes were still bright, still searching for the elephant he had once saved. As they approached the field, Hannah spotted Kelly first. The great matriarch stood near the shade of a fever tree, her presence as commanding as ever, and beside her, closely, protectively, stood Luna. But Luna was not alone. Against her side leaned a calf, a newborn, small enough that its skin still carried the softness of early life. Its ears flapped clumsily, and its trunk curled in mismatched, uncertain movements. The calf stayed pressed tightly against Luna's leg, as though afraid the world might swallow him whole if he drifted even an inch away. Hannah gasped softly, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh, my sweet girl," she whispered, "you're a mother." Ranger let out a high-pitched whine, one Hannah hadn't heard from him in years. His tail slapped the seat. He pawed at the door. All right, all right." Hannah opened it. He leapt out, awkwardly, carefully, his joints protesting but determinedly. He made his way to the fence and barked once, the sound cracking slightly with age. Luna lifted her head instantly. The joy in her rumble rolled across the grassland like thunder from a gentle storm. She hurried toward them, the calf stumbling behind her on unsteady legs. Kaylee watched from a distance, approving, allowing the reunion to unfold without interference. Luna reached the fence first, lowering her massive head until her eyes were level with Ranger's. She rumbled again, softer now, tender, full of recognition that transcended time. Ranger pressed his muzzle through the slats, and Luna wrapped her trunk around him with astonishing delicacy. Hannah watched, tears streaming freely. You remember everything, she whispered. Every moment. The calf, curious and bold in the way only the very young can be, toddled forward. It reached its tiny trunk through the fence. Ranger lifted his nose and touched the baby's trunk gently, as if offering a blessing from one survivor to another. Luna uttered a low, melodic rumble, pride, gratitude, and love woven into a single sound. Gloria appeared beside Hannah, smiling. She's a natural mother, she said. Protective, patient. That little one follows her everywhere. What's his name? Hannah asked. Gloria chuckled. We don't name them until they're a few months old. But Luna's made it clear she wants you to have that honor when the time comes. Hannah laughed softly through her tears. Me? You were her first family, Gloria said simply. Part of her story, part of his. Hannah stared at the calf, her heart swelling with a mix of joy and ache. The little one nudged Ranger again, then sneezed suddenly in a spray of dust and baby confusion. Luna pulled him back gently with her trunk, her motherly instincts sharp and instinctive. She's everything she was meant to be, Hannah whispered. Gloria nodded. You gave her the beginning. Kaylee gave her the rest. A breeze lifted across the sanctuary then, carrying with it the earthy sense of grass, soil, and the deep rumbling heartbeat of the herd. Ranger lay down beside the fence, tired from excitement, his old bones easing slowly onto the earth. Luna lowered herself until she, too, was lying beside him, only the fence separating them. No fear, no grief, only love shaped by time. Hannah crouched beside Ranger, stroking his back. You did it, old friend, she whispered. You helped her live long enough to be someone's mother. The calf pressed against Luna's side and stared curiously at Hannah, its eyes wide, bright, unknowing of the tragedies that had shaped the world before it. Luna nudged him affectionately, and he settled down with a soft sigh. Life after loss, Gloria murmured. It always finds a way. Hannah looked at Luna, strong, radiant, whole, and felt a deep sense of peace wash through her. Not the absence of grief, but its transformation. She knew she could never be Luna's entire world again. She never should have been. Her purpose had been something different, something quieter, to guide Luna from the edge of death into the arms of those who could teach her how to live fully. Love had changed shape, that was all. Ranger closed his eyes, leaning his head into the fence until it touched Luna's trunk one last time. She held him there gently as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, and as Hannah watched them, she understood something she had once feared she never would. Love does not disappear when its form changes. It grows, it adapts, it becomes new life. And sometimes, if you are lucky, it returns in the shape of a calf leaning shyly through a fence, offering you the beginning of another story.